let's now go ahead and start talking about how habits work. Now, I would like to begin by telling you a story. So, there was this man who was a real person. His name was Eugene Pauly, who, by all accounts in his family, was a wonderful man and had a long marriage that ended up being about 59 years or something of marriage. I think it was something like that. I don't have all the facts straight of his life. But Eugene Pauly contributed to science in an enormous way because when he lost his memory, the scientists who had studied memory, some of the top scientists, they were able to study him. And he became one of the most influential case studies for how memory works, and also, actually more importantly, how habits work. So what happened to him is he developed a disease later in his life when I think he was around perhaps in his late 60s or early 70s. And the disease that he unfortunately developed was a viral encephalitis, a disease that it's a relatively harmless virus, but usually just manifests as cold sores or things like that. But actually, unfortunately for him, the virus spread to his brain. And it affected him so much. He was in a coma for 10 days. He had a fever for many, many days. It was a big crisis for him and his family. But the virus affected his brain so much that he lost his memory of almost like the past 20 years or something like that of his life. So, and actually for the memory of most of his life. And, to the point where he didn't know that he had children. He didn't know how old he was. He didn't know anything. He couldn't tell you what the hallway in the hospital looked like that he had just walked through. In his when he was back home, he couldn't draw a map of where the bathroom was. He didn't know where his own kitchen was. He was just perpetually lost. But unlike some other people who suffered from similar diseases, he was functional in the sense that he could carry on a conversation with a stranger and talk about the weather. But as soon as he would ask you, so what do you think about the weather? He would ask you that question again 2 minutes later after you had answered. Oh, nice day, isn't it? What do you think about the weather? Again, he would ask you that question. And he could ask you that question maybe 4 or 5 times in a sitting with him. So imagine your life just erases. You have no memory. And all you have really is the present moment. And going a little further, a little deeper, all you have is this vague idea that you lost something and you just have to learn to deal with it. You have to accept it. And so basically, he was able to make some recovery in time as, the scientists were studying him more and more. Recovery in the sense that he was actually just only able to cope with his new reality thanks to the power of habit, thanks to the brain's inborn capacity to develop new habits all the time. So one of the ways that they realized that this was occurring is that they gave him a series of they gave him this test, which is a good test for memory building. And so they had 16 items, 16 like figurines or toys, we can say, with a flat base. And they grouped them into 8 pairs. And underneath one of the pairs was a sticker that said the word correct. And so the scientists tried to get him to just choose one, and they told him choose the figurine that says correct at the bottom. So he would just pick one up and, oh, okay, it says correct here, and pick another one. Oh, it doesn't say correct here. And eventually a normal person would just be able to tell after a while, oh, that one said correct, that one said, and you just remember, like matching game. And but he could never do it. And again, he would come by the next day and they say, okay, do you remember what you're supposed to do now? Remember we did this yesterday? He'd say, no, am I supposed to describe these items to you? And they had to tell him again, no, you're looking for the ones that say correct at the bottom. And he could never get it. You know, he was just puzzled. He didn't know what he was doing. But amazingly, after 28 days of this training, he could now start to identify the ones that said correct 85% of the time. And it was just a remarkable breakthrough, because this is nothing like this had happened before. Only something similar, which I'll talk about next. And then after 39 days of doing this training, he could identify the ones that said correct 95% of the time. And they were just, he was blown away. He was like, how am I doing this? Because he would just pick them up and it would say correct. And he had no idea how he was doing this. Can you imagine that? It's kind of like that movie that you may have seen with Jim Carrey called The Majestic. Of course, that's totally based on fiction. This is a scientific study that we're talking about, the story of Eugene Pauly. But in that movie, The Majestic, if you've seen it with Jim Carrey goes to war. And when he comes back from the war, he comes back to his family. But he forgets everything because he had an accident during the war. And he loses all his memory. So he doesn't remember really his parents. He doesn't remember his hometown. He doesn't remember anything that they used to do. Until one day, he is at a party and there's a piano there. And he goes up to the piano and he starts playing, and suddenly he starts like playing like this amazing song, this amazing rock song. You know, took place in the 1950s, that story. And he's just jamming and everybody's dancing, and he has no clue how he's playing the piano. I mean, an experience like that has just got to be, it's one of the most thrilling things you could ever experience. So Eugene was having that. You know, he just knew, but he had no idea how. And so that's when the scientists realized. And I'll tell you another quick thing about him. The scientist warned his wife, who was very devoted, his very devoted wife, Beverly, who took care of him, along with his children, that you had to watch him all the time, because if he walks out the door, he will not know how to come home. So they would go for walks every day together, because he also had to exercise. And they would go out for walks every day. And one day he was missing. And she got so freaked out because he could never come back. You know, where could he be? So, she was in tears and desperate and called everybody. And suddenly he appeared again. He was back home. And of course, when he saw her and she was in tears, he didn't know why. He didn't even know he had gone out. He didn't even know he was missing. She looked at his hands, and his hands were dirty. And she looked in the other part of the house, and there were some pine cones there. and there's some pine cones that were in a neighbor's yard that was always nicely decorated. She realized, and he went out for a walk, and he had come back, and he brought back these souvenirs. And everybody was wondering, how did he do it? How could he remember the way back home? So that, plus the experiment with the figurines and picking up the ones as it correct, the scientist realized in those 39 instances that he was picking these things up, he was developing the habit, and the habit of picking up the ones that were correct. And just by virtue of his brain being capable of developing a new habit, even in that state, in that deteriorating state, is how he knew which ones were correct. And because his street was always the same, the mailboxes were always the same, and everything always looked the same, in his walks, he also developed the habit of walking down that street and walking back down. And so just by virtue of those cues and those signals, his brain developed a habit, and so that's how he could find his way back home. But if one day there was construction and something looked different in the neighborhood, or a neighbor had changed something in their mailbox or something, now the brain didn't have those cues to go by, so now he could no longer find his way back home. And that was also evidenced in the figurines. So basically, when they took the figurines and now scrambled them and just put them in a pile, and they asked them, please pair, the ones that are correct, he couldn't do it. Because now that it was in this random order, he didn't know which one was correct or not correct. The reason why he knew before was because they were always in the same pair, and they always appeared in the same way. And so those cues now created the routine of him identifying the one that's correct, and then getting the reward of being right. So they were amazed to find out that he was developing habits. And in addition to that, there was the scientist also in an unrelated experiment. Oops, sorry. Did some studies on rats. I apologize to those who are against animal testing. Hopefully they treated these rats in a good way. They did a study with rats, where, as you can see in this maze here at the bottom, they had a T-shaped maze, and there was a little wall that they put in front of the rat. And when a sound clicked, they would lift the wall, and the rat, maybe at this point could smell the chocolate on the left side there of that T. But in the beginning, the rat would first sniff around the wall, scratch the floor. It would take the rat a good 5-10 minutes, something like that, to actually get to that chocolate, even though it was simple. And sometimes it would even go right first, and then it would turn around, and then it would find the chocolate. And at this point, they had inserted these, I don't know how to describe it, these sensors in the rat's brain, where they could completely monitor the rat's brain as it was going about this thinking process. And so this little rat would take about 5-10 minutes, but each time he or she would do this experiment, it was less and less time. And each time the brain activity in the rat's inside of the rat decreased. So that first the brain had a lot of activity because it didn't know what it was doing. So it was didn't know what was going on. I'm in this maze, there's chocolate there. But suddenly, the more and more the rat does this, the less activity there is in the brain. And so then it's more automatic for the rat to get to the chocolate. And finally, the rat gets to the chocolate in like less than 8 seconds. It's like boom, because there's the cue, there's the wall is lifted, now comes the routine, and boom, and there is the reward, getting the chocolate. And so the rat just does it instantly, automatically, and there's zero firings in the brain except for one, which we'll talk about in a moment. But that's because now the routine is so automatic, the rat just does that without even thinking. And that was what was happening with also Eugene. His brain didn't have to work. His brain could just identify the figurines that were correct. So how was this occurring? It was occurring because inside of the brain, we have something called the basal ganglia that you can see here in the middle. And the basal ganglia is basically, as you can see in this picture, in the core of the brain, or one of the items that are in the core of the brain. So apparently, according to science, our brains have increased in size over time. Of course, we're talking, over 1 million years of human evolution. And the outer layers of the brain are newer. They come from, like when we're having conversations about the internet or conversations, things like that of our modern day, the brain activity is signaled in the outer layers of the brain. That's where scientists will find that sort of activity. When we talk about deeper emotions, we're in the prefrontal cortex, deciding whether things are right or wrong, making decisions that are more based on our complex modern reality. They are in different outer layers. But in the core of the brain are some of the most primitive things about us. Things that have to do with survival, things that have to do with some of our most basic instincts. And one of our most basic qualities that our amazing brain has is the basal ganglia that is where habits are formed. So basically, the rat, as it was going through the maze, now the activity was only firing in the basal ganglia. So the rat was getting the chocolate with the help of its basal ganglia, with the help of its habit potential. Same thing with Eugene. It was his basal ganglia that they identified was the one that was helping him do this, develop the habits, despite the fact that the exterior of the brain was deteriorating, which is why he couldn't remember anything. So in a moment, we'll have a discussion, but I'll just show you basically then how the habits work according to these scientific discoveries. Now, the way it works is, you see, there's a cue. Like in the case of the rat, the sound, the bell that rang when the wall was lifted, which then freed the rat to go find the chocolate. So that's the cue. And then the routine was the rabbit going down to find the chocolate, and then the reward is eating the chocolate. So it's a fabulous, fabulous habit loop, because it starts with a very clearly defined cue, and then once the cue is there, then the brain goes by the cue. So, oh, okay, wall is lifted, sound. Okay, time to find the chocolate. Boom! Without thinking, the rat goes, and then the best reward ever, the chocolate, getting a piece of chocolate. Perfect habit loop that the brain could totally get behind 100%. And then in Eugene's case, the cue was seeing those figurines and in a certain order, then the routine of lifting it and finding the correct ones, and then boom, finding the sticker that said correct. That was the reward. So basically then, our habits are built in on this scientific level. We may have a perspective in Tantra as well as how a spiritual perspective on this, but we won't talk about that today. Today we're only talking about the habit loop as according to science. It happens because there is 3 important built-in things that the brain goes by: a cue, a routine, and a reward. And I want to start inviting you now to start typing in your comments and your questions on this topic. And as you're doing that, I will close my contextualize this a little bit more. So, you know, everything that we do by habit is because of this habit loop that the brain can do. And the reason why the brain does this is because the brain is always trying to preserve energy. It's always trying to find the automated system of doing things. You know, it's like it's smarter than us human beings sometimes because, now you can automate so many things, right? Like you could sign up to our email list and boom, you get an email right away. Nobody has to press a button. It just happens automatically. This automation is so attractive now in our modern society. You know what I mean? Um, and uh, and so thanks to automation, we preserve so much energy. We don't have to do as many things. Okay? And that's what the brain is trying to do. It's trying to preserve as much energy as possible. That's why it has a basal ganglia to do that automated work. So that while you are, let's say, driving, and as you're driving, think of all the countless things you're doing. Okay, my speed, am I going at the speed limit? Okay, yeah, pressing the accelerator, yes. If I'm driving manual, am I in the right gear? The street signs, the cars next to me, the space between the cars. I mean, so much activity is happening while you're driving. And yet, while you're driving, you could be listening to an audiobook or listening to a YouTube video and processing so much complex information and yet still do this complex thing of driving. It's because at that point it is such an ingrained habit that the brain has freed you up now to learn new things. Or else, if you didn't have the basal ganglia, every day you'd have to learn how to drive all over again. And every day you'd have to learn to brush your teeth all over again. And every day you'd have to learn to tie your shoes all over again. But because of the basal ganglia and that habit building potential, you are free to do so much more. And that's the good side of it. But then there's the bad side. And that is our bad habits, because apparently the brain cannot tell the difference between good or bad. Anything can become a habit. Anything at all. Anything that has a defined cue, routine, and reward. Which is why you may have noticed if you tried to do the habit of meditating every day or going to the gym every day, and you say, okay, this week I'm going to go every day, but you miss one day, now it's very likely you'll miss again because you become discouraged, right? You become discouraged, and now you've developed a new habit. It's just staying home. The cue is, oh, I missed my appointment. I missed the time. Oh, the cue is, I'm busy again with work. Boom, the routine. So I don't go to the gym. And then the reward, well, I stay at home and I relax. But then the next day you feel terrible about that, right? Because you didn't maintain your goal. So this is just kind of like the inner workings of how the habits work. And I'd like to hear your thoughts before we continue. So let's see here. Stephen says, or October, he's saying, beautiful story. Thank you, Krsnatma. I've also read about bad habits that we have to make the reward for self-destructive behavior so repulsive to us that we will reject the cue. That's right. Thank you, brothers. So, let's talk a little bit more about that. We won't go into too much detail about it. Maybe in the next session we will. But let's say then that you want to develop the habit of every morning waking up and doing your meditation. So what these scientists suggest is to create the cue for that and to create a reward. So the cue could be that your alarm on your phone is kirtan. Bhavanam Kevalam Kirtan. So you wake up and you hear the kirtan, right? there it is. That's my cue. Completely automatic. Or you have Baba Nam Kevalam on your wall posted right in front of you, or your mantra, your personal mantra that you can also get through our program. And so that's your cue. So then, maybe you have to get up and pee or something really fast, but then the cue is there. Now I have to meditate. So why not sit back down and do your meditation? Boom. First thing in the morning. And then reward yourself. The reward could be that you set a piece of chocolate. A piece of chocolate right next to your bed. So that's your reward. And try that for a little while. Me personally, I'm sorry I told you something that I personally wouldn't have that as my reward, because that goes against another habit I'm trying to build. But it's just an example. But if you're cool with chocolate, then try it. So that now, the next time you meditate, it's possible that during your meditation, you're going to be thinking about chocolate. And that's actually a good thing, because now you are anticipating the reward. It's working. The loop is working. That's going to keep you meditating every day. Now, October said, or something repulsive. So for example, to break a habit. So let's say that you want to break the habit of being, of waking up too late. So you want to be up every morning by, let's say, 7 a.m. So you could set an automatic tweet. I heard that somebody did this. An automatic tweet that's supposed to go off automatically through one of these automation apps that says something like, let's say, it's Sherry. Sherry is a lazy bum. She's still sleeping right now. So that's your automatic tweet. So Sherry then will definitely want to wake up before 7 so she can go to her phone and disable the automatic tweet, so that repulsive thing like October described doesn't happen. So you see, the reward then in that case is the avoidance of that thing. You know what I mean? And so sometimes that is just as good. I mean, I'll tell you honestly, one time, when I was a young man, I still am a young man. So are you. Regardless, however old you are, age is in the mind in many ways. When I was younger, I got caught driving on suspended, with a suspended driver's license. And maybe it was my second time doing that or something. And then the judge was like, I told the judge, I'm sorry, Judge, I will never do this again. And the judge was like, oh, I know you're not going to do this again. I'm going to help you not do this again. And the judge was like, yeah, your license is suspended now for, I think it was 6 months, 9 months, maybe 6 months. And the judge was right. I mean, that I never did that again, but I learned a lesson the hard way. So sometimes our bad habits can be cut because of something, like he said, repulsive that happens to us that totally scares us from doing the wrong thing. Okay. Now, let's see here. Let's continue on Facebook. So Shannon says, to clarify, if I want to add a practice to my life, if I'm committed to performing it every day at the same time for the same amount of time for at least 39 days, it would go into the part of the brain where instinctive behaviors live, and it will become a part of my daily routine. Okay. So great question, Shannon. The way that the scientists would answer this is that it does not take 39 days. You may have heard of this thing of 21 days to build a habit, right? Super popular. Even me, at some point, I was like, when we, in my old meditation programs, it was like, do something 21 times or something like that. Because apparently scientifically it took 21 times to get a habit down, right? So that science was wrong. Now there's new science, Shannon. It doesn't have to take 39 times. It may have taken it because I'll tell you what, a monkey did that same experiment that Eugene Pauly did, and guess what? He could get the correct ones after 11 times. It took the monkey only 11 days of training to start identifying all of the correct figurines. But it took Eugene Pauly 39 times because obviously he was in a much more severe condition, and he depended on very fixed cues to get the routine down, to get the habit down. But you and I could have gotten that routine in maybe 2 times or three or four times. We would have nailed it, you know. So basically, now on the other hand, what you are also describing is, for example, how can I get the habit that I want down as packed, as tight as how I drive every day? You know, like me personally, if I could go to the gym in the same way that I can drive, because I happen to think I'm also a good driver, despite that story I told you about my driving record, I would be so happy. Because, gosh, I would be in the gym then every day, you know, and I would be meeting all of my fitness goals, you know. So, um, so how can I get then my habits as tight as the ones that are inbuilt, like how you tie your shoes, how shower every day, for example. So that, yes, over time, the habit gets more ingrained, and yes, it becomes more and more automatic. So you're on the right track. Yes, after repetition, those habits will get more automatic. That's what we want to get to, a level of maximum automaticity. But I wouldn't try to, I wouldn't give it a number, because then, we get fixated on that number. It's more like the habit could be built in just 3 or 4 times. And then after that, you want to just be more consistent. But you could really develop a new habit after just 3 or 4 times. Like, right now, October's saying, chocolate is great. Thanks for the idea. You see, if October tries this and October let us know how it goes, it could just be 3 or 4 times that he has some chocolate. And then he find himself that even without the chocolate, he'll still want to meditate. Something won't feel raw. Something won't. His brain now is saying, "Hey, I don't need the chocolate to do this. This meditation is good for me." That's the reward. Something intrinsic. Let's see here. So, thank you, Shannon and October. Let's look at YouTube here. So, Crescendo says. Actually, Aaron first said, I've been focusing the last week or so on trying to be more aware of my movements each day as opposed to just being on autopilot. I'm excited for today's topic. Aaron, I'm sorry I disappointed you in this sense. I just built up the whole autopilot thing. Right? Thanks to the basal ganglia. And now here you are trying to get outside of the autopilot thing. So the autopilot thing is not so bad, is it, Aaron? The autopilot thing is thanks to our basal ganglia. Thank goodness for autopilot. Because then we're freed up to do other things. However, what you are saying is that you don't want to do the bad things on autopilot. Yes, very good. This is why I love our community and I love our discussions, because you all really, really flesh out these topics and by sharing your thoughts. And so now we're on this. So thank you, Aaron, for bringing this up, because what we do want to do is remove the autopilot of bad habits and try to identify what was the cue that's creating my bad habits and what is the reward. Like the bad habit of like I had a friend I had somebody in one of my meditation workshops who wanted to get free from anger, more free from anger, And by the way, you can't get free 100% from anger, right? We'll talk about that later. But so this gentleman, he didn't like that he's always yelling at his kids. He can't seem to control that, yelling at his wife and things like that. So basically, one of the things that he had to identify is he has to identify what is the cue that sets off that routine. So the cue could be, let's say it's with a spouse. So the cue is every time my spouse disagrees with me, or I feel like my spouse is being negative, where I'm trying to be positive and they're being negative, that sets me off. And I don't even realize it's setting me off. It just does. And then that cues a routine. The routine is I snap. I snap or I criticize. And the reward is, what is the reward? That's now a mystery. Now that is less identifiable. The reward, there's no reward there. She gets upset or he gets upset and I regret doing it. But there's actually some reward there that is misplaced. And the reward could have been that one day the partner agreed and said, yes, you're right. Or the reward could be that somewhere down the line in your past, when somebody criticized you, you didn't like that about yourself. You believed that you were negative or something, and you wanted to change that, or you have some sort of thing from your past that now, which is also another cue that's being tapped into, right? When you see your partner being negative, it reminds you of unconsciously of a time when you used to be negative that you didn't like about yourself, or somebody made you not like about yourself. And so now the routine is set off because of these two cues, one from the present and then one that also taps into the past. But the reward is what has to be studied. Okay? And you have to sit down and ask yourself, what do I gain from that? When did I first start doing that? What does it look like when I do that? And as you answer those questions, you identify the reward. And so what you can do then to change this whole situation is you just have to change the routine, because the cue will be there. The cue is the partner says something negative. All right? Like you're out and you're saying, isn't it a beautiful day? And your partner's like, it's going to rain in 10 minutes. You're like, oh, why are you so negative? Right? So then the thing is that when you identify the cue, you have to now change the routine. So one thing that person could do is, rather than lash out, maybe that person could try asking questions. Okay. And once you, and the thing is to not be on autopilot and identify the cues. Sometimes there's a physical cue. When you get angry, you feel it in your stomach, as we would say in Tantra, in the Manipura chakra. So in that moment, then you tell the partner, instead of lashing out, you could try asking questions. For example, oh, and if it rained, that would ruin our day? Or, oh, really? Is it going to rain? Is that what it says on weather? Is that what it says on the app in your phone? So now you're asking questions. And the partner will say something that will relieve the tension. And now you've got a new routine. I don't lash out. Now I ask questions when I'm set off by my cue. And what is the reward? The reward is now better communication with my partner. But you could come up with a better reward. When they do that, the reward could be a kiss. You kiss your partner. Or your partner maybe appreciates that you've now changed your behavior, and so they give you a little kiss, and that'll feel great, right? And so now the habit loop has changed. But more important even than changing the reward is to change the routine and keep the cue. Keep the cue. Because the cue can now be a signal for you that you're about to do something wrong. Let's see here. Let's continue. So Oasis says, crescendo habit loops must be an evolutionary fitness feature. One might try imagining a world without habit loops. Yes, it is an evolutionary fitness feature. And I think you agree. It's wonderful. I thank God that we have it. Karen says, timely topic encourages me to be more aware of the cues I'm responding to. Very good. Exactly, Karen. And if you want to learn more about these, you want to look at the work of Charles Duhigg, which we'll be talking more about, okay, in our next personal development sessions that we're moving toward here. And Aaron Hill, again, this explains why I was able to succeed in stopping smoking with trigger awareness and avoidance. Exactly, Aaron. If you want to break a habit, you have to then change the cues. Get rid of the cues. That's another way to break a habit. So, for example, if you get up every morning and your phone is right next to you, and your phone has a million Facebook notifications and a million things like that, and you're trying to do less with social media, then those are the cues. You see, that's the cue to get you on Facebook now, that notification, right? So then you want to get rid of those cues, like Aaron said, so that you don't go into Facebook as much. Like what I do is I have Facebook, and I know you're gonna, and I'm sorry we're on Facebook right now, but thanks to Facebook we can meet, right? It's one way that we're meeting. So thank you, Facebook, but no thank you, Facebook. I don't want to go into you that much. So how do I avoid going into Facebook? Is my Facebook app on my phone is at the last page. So I have to scroll like five, six different pages until boop, it's there. And then other things I've done in the past is I unsign myself from Facebook so that when I log into Facebook, I have to put my password again. And it makes me think, do I really need to go into this? And I've developed also other things to change the cues, to eliminate the cues or make my steps toward the bad habit more. So now there's more steps between me and my bad habit. So if your cigarettes are something you want to avoid, get rid of the triggers, put your cigarettes in a lockbox so that before you get to your cigarettes, you have to like open up a lock, put in a little code. Okay, now I can get my cigarette. So you create steps between you and the things that you don't want. Right? That's very, very helpful. Or just get rid of them. Get rid of them. And if you have the ability to get rid of them, then do it, do away with the things that you don't want in your life. Just get rid of them. Throw them out. Throw out all the things that remind you of those things. If you're having a hard time forgetting somebody and because you have a habit with that person, you built a habit. If you see their pictures all the time, oh man, that's the cue. That's the cue to, oh, they were so wonderful. Start crying again. Want to call them again. You have to just get rid of that person. No more pictures. If that's what you want. Let's see here. So we'll close with a couple more comments. Christina says, very good talk. Thank you. I try to arrange my physical environment in such a way that I remember to do spiritual habits, especially those which may be difficult to stick to, and to remind myself daily why the habits are important for me to stick to. Usually it's best if the consequences affect others outside of myself. Yes. So Christina, another good way to build a good habit or to get the motivation. This is about building motivation toward the habit. Ask yourself why. Why? If suddenly today you're like, oh, I don't feel like meditating, which can happen at any time. Meditation is a hard habit to maintain. and me as a meditation teacher and us as a spiritual community, we need to be open about that. It's difficult to get that habit down. That's why I had to do it as soon as I wake up. I have to just do it because for many reasons, but it just has to be the first thing I do. And like what I recommend that you do if you want to get down a meditation habit is this. I recommend that you wake up in the morning and the first thing that you do is listen to kirtan music with headphones if you sleep with somebody else, if there are people around you. And that you spend the first 5-10 minutes just sitting up as if you're doing meditation, listening to kirtan, and just zoning out into the ideation. Because what that's going to do for you is that is going to connect you. It's like you'll have the first union, and you'll be connected with God, the Supreme, because we practice spiritual meditation. So that's your union. You've achieved it. You've done it. You've connected. You've told the Lord, you've told the Supreme, I did not forget you today. First thing I did was, boop, go straight to you. Other people say, oh, first thing you got to do in the morning is you got to make your bed. That'll make a great day. No problem. I'm not criticizing any of that, honestly. That's for a different goal. Those people want to be efficient, organized, timely. Yes, that'll work. Us yogis who are here, right? We also have this desire to evolve spiritually. So then the first thing is there's that initial union. Then you can get up, you can shower, you can do what you need to do. And then I would recommend sit again. This time, do your meditation again, maybe this time without the kirtan. Now you're deepening the union. So I like to look at the kirtan part as union, and then the formal meditation as deepening the union. And there you have it. You have just meditated twice, all in the scope of the first few hours of the day. And those of us who have families, sometimes we can't meditate at night because we have to feed our families. We have so many things to do for our children. So this could also help with that. You get 2 meditations in the morning, and you try that. And so then, if you should lose motivation to do that, then if you should lose motivation, then like Christina was saying, then think about how it's benefiting not just yourself but others. Ask yourself the question, why am I doing this? Why do I even think I need to meditate or I want to meditate? And you'll see, because when I meditate, I'm nicer to people. When I meditate, I'm nicer to myself. When I meditate, I feel connected to the Supreme. And so always asking yourself why is very helpful. And Aaron says, not at all. It wasn't as expected, but it was still perfect. Okay. I think we were talking about the negative autopilot. And let's close now with these comments. I'll read all of them. Not me, 3 or 4 doesn't do it. Right, okay. About getting to that automaticity point, right, Shannon, of our habits. We want to do the things we want to do in the same way that we tie our shoes, just effortless, fast. Rasha says, by practicing continuously for 21 days, you will allow your neuropeptides to get the habit established in your system. So Rasha, I was saying earlier that 21 days thing, if you have found some research that proves that, then that's cool. What I have heard about that, what I know about that is that there was a plastic surgeon who wrote a book, a self-help book, and he, in his experience with his clients who he did surgery on, at first they didn't like how they looked. And he found that it would take, when they had some reconstruction surgery, something like that. But they found that after they looked at themselves 21 times, Now they liked how they looked. So he kind of just applied that as evidence that, so it takes 21 times to create a new habit, to accomplish something that you like, to make something more regular. So as far as I know, that's the only evidence around that 21 times number. I like the new science that says it's not about times, it's just about cue, routine, and reward. Because I find that I can create bad habits just because I do something. If I do something that I don't want to do once, I'm very likely to do it again. And I have observed in myself how fast I can get to that second time. You know, like I miss an appointment, I'm likely to miss another appointment. You know, I forgot to grade my student's paper and on a certain way. Boom, it can happen just like that again. You know, things like that. So thank you though for sharing that, Rasha. And Shannon says awareness of self cues behavior. Thank you. Okay. So I want to thank you all so much. And Rasha, we should look into what you said to deepen this about the narrow peptides, okay, to get the habit established in the system. There may also be some solid science behind that.